Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a sledgehammer to a deeply ingrained corporate truism. We're going to use some hard data and dynamic modeling to see what happens when the very things we assume are universally good for business actually turn out to be completely relative. Let's get right into it.
So let's start with this massive assumption. Adaptability to change makes people successful at work. I mean, it sounds completely obvious, right? It's practically the golden rule of the modern workplace. We just assume that flexibility, agility, adaptability, these are the absolute ultimate signals of success. The conventional wisdom is, if you're adaptable, you survive. If you aren't, you fall behind. We treat this as an unquestionable baseline.
But then we run into this specific number, negative 0.0439. This is a negative Pearson correlation drawn from a huge set of global polling data, and it mathematically shatters that entire assumption. It turns out adaptability is not universally tied to success. In fact, in certain environments, it literally has a negative effect.
Just to put this into perspective, the scale of this data is massive. We're talking over 3,000 responses across 96 countries and 26 languages. And what it proves is a statistically significant negative correlation between adaptability to change and what spiral dynamics calls the green value system. Basically, green cultures are the ones driven by community, empathy, and collective harmony.
So here's the crucial takeaway. As an organization's green stage strengthens, individual adaptability actually loses its value as a success signal. Why is that? Well, it's because relational stability, shared values, and consensus end up replacing isolated flexibility. Think about it. In a deeply empathetic, community-driven culture, an individual who's rapidly pivoting and constantly changing course isn't seen as some nimble innovator. They're actually seen as a disruptive force who's breaking the relational anchors of the entire team.
Section 1. The hidden cultural wiring. Let's look at how different systems decode this.
When you remove adaptability as a baseline success metric, the reactions across the system diverge wildly. The blue value system, which really thrives on order, rules, and bureaucracy, they feel a massive sense of relief. For them, it's a safe, steady return to procedural clarity and predictable rules. But right across the hall, you have the orange value system. These are your ambitious, highly competitive scaling achievers, and they completely panic. To them, removing adaptability looks like a terrifying loss of market velocity and competitive agility.
And this slide brilliantly illustrates how the yellow value system reacts. Now, yellow is all about systemic competence and integration. So when they see that adaptability signal removed, they view it as a total collapse of their essential systemic learning space. They lose their ability to navigate context entirely. So by changing just one metric, you've created harmony for some, total panic for others, and systemic blindness for the rest.
Section 2. The algebra of conscience.
So how exactly do we manage a workforce where the exact same action triggers completely opposite reactions? Well, we do it by changing our definition of management math. This means stepping away from that old chainsaw approach of raw cost cutting. You know, where an employee is just a spreadsheet row to be deleted, and instead embracing a dynamic model that actually calculates human psychology. We literally have to map out the invisible human costs before we make a move.
What you're seeing here is how that dynamic model translates into a functional dashboard. It takes really messy, volatile variables, things like a team's tribal instincts, their fears, their trust levels, and it maps them into a mathematical state vector. You input your proposed management action, and the math actually predicts the psychological future of the company. That's wild.
But to predict that future, you need incredibly deep sensors. The math here is powered by 13,000 correlations derived from these 5 layers of sensing. You know, most companies only ever measure that top red layer, the visible actions, like whether someone is showing up on time. But honestly, by the time someone is acting out, they've already mentally quit. This model digs way deeper, down into motivation, psychology, and even foundational demographics to capture the true, hidden wiring of the workforce.
Section 3. Predicting the butterfly effect.
Let's look at a classic, everyday corporate scenario. The spreadsheet says you need to reduce costs, so you execute Action Use 7, reduce staff. You fire an employee, let's call him Dave, purely to save his $50,000 salary. Now, in the old world, the calculation ends right there. Dave is gone, you save the money, congratulations.
But check out this timeline. This shows the invisible butterfly effect that our simulator catches. Firing Dave spikes the systemic fear vector of the remaining staff. This immediate fear causes a total crash in trust. But shockingly, the data shows it also creates a spike in ageism, as a terrified workforce suddenly begins battling generationally over scarce resources. Ultimately, the social fabric tears so badly that leadership's absolute authority crumbles. You saved $50,000, sure, but you basically destroyed the company's operating system to do it.
And the divergence is even wilder with other actions. Take action U1, sending staff on unpaid vacation. Now you'd think everyone would hate losing money, right? But the data shows the tribal purple system accepts it as a shared survival ritual. The empathetic green system accepts it to save their colleagues' jobs. But the ambitious orange system, they reject it entirely as an inefficient career roadblock and immediately start updating their resumes. It's the exact same action, creating completely different realities based entirely on the group's profile.
Section 4. The new management math. And here is that new scoreboard. This formula right here, objective function J. The goal of modern management shouldn't just be maximizing profit while totally ignoring the human wreckage left behind. The new goal is to maximize this stability score, mapping the total impact of our actions against what we truly value as an organization.
Take a really close look at how these variables are weighted in this new math. The financial cost of a direct action is weighted at a heavy 1.0, but look right beneath it. Employee fear is mathematically weighted at 0.9, and well-being is at 0.8. By weighting fear almost identically to financial impact, the algorithm actually demands an empathetic leadership style. It mathematically penalizes you for traumatizing your workforce, which mathematically proves that a toxic workplace is a fundamentally inefficient one.
And sometimes, the math leads to some profoundly counterintuitive advice. The model reveals that when the psychological state vector shows dangerously low well-being and high systemic exhaustion, the absolute most strategic optimizing move a manager can make is adaptive protocol U2, which is do nothing. Just stop intervening, stop the endless reorgs, just let the system breathe. Honestly, it is an incredibly hard thing for an active manager to accept, but it is exactly what the data demands for true stabilization.
Which brings us right back to our starting point. We've seen how deeply interconnected and surprisingly delicate these cultural value systems really are. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to mull over. If we blindly force something like adaptability onto a relational system that deeply values stability, or if we force rigid rules onto an innovative system, what else are we breaking without even knowing it? Thanks for joining us on this explainer. We'll catch you next time.